understanding the characters and who's what and what the relationship is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The brothers and
yeah,
being the nephew of David and all the rest of it.
yeah. So brilliant. Thanks, David. We're online now, ready to go, and it's me and thee to start with this morning. So I thank you so much for carrying it for the last couple of days. I had a flying visit down to Plymouth to do. So shall we do up to 25 as a block? And then unravel it as we go through. We'll probably make, if there's only two of us, we'll probably make quite good progress through it. But shall I read and you pray? I don't know
Yeah,
what you'd prefer. I
yeah,
don't know what
yeah.
you did the last couple of days.
Well,
But
I read the last one because you had to get your mouth around all the different.
well, you can laugh at me doing the same thing this morning, and I'll let you pray. Yeah, go for it, David.
Father, we just thank you, and we love you, and we're just thankful of Nigel being back safely. And Lord, we just pray as we enter into your word again, that you'll just reveal to us your truth into our hearts, revelation of truth, Lord. And we just look forward to delving into this chapter of 2 Samuel, and look forward to hearing what you've got to say in there as well as ourselves. In Jesus' name, Amen.
Amen. Okay, so we're 2 Samuel chapter 3 today, and we are working our way through this. So this is the kind of period in between the kingdoms where David's king of one of part of the kingdom of Israel, but not the whole thing yet, over the tribes of Judah. So I'll pick up in verse 3. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. And sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, Ahinob of Jezreel, and Ahinob of Jezreel, and his second was Chilib of Abigail, widow of Nabal of Carmel, and the third Absalom, the son of Maachah, the daughter of Talmiah, king of Gershu, and the fourth Adonijah, the son of Higgith, and the fifth Shephatiah, the son of Abital, and the sixth Ithream of Eglah, David's wife. These were born to David in Hebron. While there was a war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine, whose name was Rishpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ibasheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth, and said, Am I a dog of a dog's head of Judah? To this day I keep showing steadfast love to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers, to his friends. And have I not given you into the hand of, and I have not given you into the hand of David? And yet you charge me today with a fault concerning a woman. God do so to Abner, and more also, if I do not accomplish for David what the Lord has sworn to him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul, and set up a throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to Beersheba. And Ishbosheth could not answer Abner one word, because he feared him. And Abner sent messengers to David on his behalf, saying, To whom does this land belong? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring all Israel to you. And he said, Good, I will make a covenant with you, but one thing I require of you is of you, that is, you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face. Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife Michal, for whom I paid the bride price of 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband Paltiel, son of Laish. But the husband went with her, weeping after her all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, go, return. And he returned. And Abner conferred with the elders of Israel, saying, for some time past you have been seeking David as king over you. Now then, bring it about. For the Lord has promised David, saying, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hands of the Philistines and from the hands of their enemies. Abner spoke to Benjamin. Then Abner went to tell David at Hebron that all Israel and the whole house of Benjamin thought good to do so. Then Abner came with 20 men to David at Hebron, and David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. And Abner said to David, I will arise and go and gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may reign over all your heart desires. So David sent Abner away and went in peace. Just then the servants of David arrived with Joab from a raiding party, bringing much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for he'd sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the army that was with him came, it was told to Joab, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he has let him go, and he has gone in peace. Then Joab went into the king and said, what have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why is it that you have sent him away, so he is gone? You know that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you, and to know your going out and your coming in, and to know all that you are doing. And we'll leave it on that cliffhanger there. But that's going to pick up a little bit as we go on. So here we have this in-between kingdom time between Saul and David. Saul has done a very, very good job in worldly leadership terms of feathering people's nests and making sure they're comfortable. They've got, what they need. They've got some things. They've got some prosperity. They've got some of those things going on. Saul's done a good job of making sure that the tribes of Israel are fairly happy with him. And in all good leadership terms, any good leader would do those kind of things, would make sure that he's politically secure. A lot of Saul's effort has been towards his legacy. So he's intended that none of these guys are going to backstab him. He's worked it through carefully. He's done a good job of all of this. But he's now dead. Jonathan, his son, is now dead. And things are beginning to crumble. And I think I heard it put in a book I read about starfish and spiders. That actually, here you've got something that's at the top. If you get rid of the head, if you poke the head of a spider, you kill it and everything dies. But with a starfish, if you cut part of it off, it spreads and just starts new starfishes. So there's a whole principle of leadership structure. The head has gone. All the things that Saul had done as favors to people and all the rest of it was all wasted now because he was dead. And so that all begins to crumble and fall. And this is what we're watching, working our way through. And here, if we remember back, Abner was Saul's uncle. So it was all a family deal, how he set it all up from the beginning. And actually here, his uncle Abner, it's not mentioning that it's Saul's uncle. It's not mentioning that there's any blood between them or anything like that. But what it's saying is Abner is turning towards David. There's long wars that are going on and battles that are going on and things between the two houses. But actually it's part of the settling process. and things begin to settle down. And now the top general of the Israel army has said, right, I'm going to help David. And he goes over to see David and talk to him. And this is because he was getting too powerful. So the king in place, who's got that wonderfully unpronounceable name of Ishbosheth, he is weak. He hasn't got what his dad has. And I've come across movements in churches where very often the son tries to take over from the father, but hasn't got the connections the father had. I think our own movement, some time ago, the leader of that basically said, if I go to New Zealand, I know the guys who lead stuff in New Zealand because I did their marriage. I dedicated their first child. I did all those things. There's a long connection of 40 years there. To expect someone else just to come in and take over those connections is not going to work. And actually, this is what begins to fall apart with Saul's kingdom. The connections are just not there. These were guys living in cushy palaces, living in the lap of luxury because their daddy did well. Suddenly trying to make all those connections. Jonathan was the one Saul had invested in. He was the one who won things in battle, who had a track record in the people of Israel. Jonathan was going to be the guy, and everyone knew it. So all the others are all the spares. And suddenly the spares find themselves in power, and that's the issue here. Is they haven't got the weight, and so Abner begins taking over. That becomes mighty. They try and clip his wings a bit, and as a result of that, he says, "Nah, I've had enough of this. I'm off to David." And this is what we see happening, and the aftermath of it as we're about to work our way through. Any things you'd like to chip in there, David? I've done a little bit of an overview, but
it reminds me very much. I mean, you've got here, and it says that Abner was strengthening his hold on the house of Saul. So I imagine that Ishbosheth was actually governing with Abner's strength. It wasn't Ishbosheth who was actually managing to do it on his own. And it just reminds me that if Saul had built his house on corruption, which is actually paying certain people to keep him in power, it just reminds me of certain African countries that I've come across where that has happened, where I've been involved with them, and trying to change, even though the president wants to change. It's difficult because those people who put him into power do not want to relinquish the backhanded. I don't want to go into any details, but there's that in it's a natural thing of the flesh to hold power through other people's influence. And here we've got Abner, who's actually Ishbosheth's. If he was Saul's uncle, he's Ishbosheth's great uncle then. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got a lot of wisdom behind him, and he strengthens his hold on the house because Ishbosheth, as you say, is a weak king. And it's interesting because there's no record of Ishbosheth, unless I missed it in this passage, agreeing to Abner going and bringing the two houses together. But Abner does not go to the king. He goes to the elders of Israel, which is interesting. So there is a power base there in the elders of Israel that are above the king.
Yeah, I think the way I've seen it best put is a YouTube video I came across. That's how we learn things now. I've even heard of people learning how to do farming off YouTube videos. So, but this the king or the person on the throne is held in power by the people underneath.
Yeah.
So the agreement of all 12 tribes to go with Saul and work together was a deal that was done under these tribes. These tribes all operate in their own structures.
Yeah.
And so the king is the agreement of all those tribes, is what puts him in power. What Abner's done is he's gone down to the next tier and he's undercut the king from that source of power. He's got an agreement from the tribes. They're going to go David's way. And really, I think it's an issue of the tipping point, which we bring up a few things here, but the tipping point, once you get past like 8 tribes, they're all with me, what are you going to do? The rest just fall like dominoes. And so, yeah.
The interesting thing is that this it's difficult to go through these stories verse by verse. It's actually, you've got to see the whole thing. And at the end, you think Abner is... you're left with that question: Is Abner really trying to bring the two sides together, or is he trying to actually have his own way and get power over the two sides? Even if he comes underneath David, he sees his power base as being much greater if the two are together, possibly, or he's coming in, and as Joab says, what have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why is it that you sent him away? Surely he realized that Abner, the son of Ner, came to deceive you. Now, is that true, or is it because Joab is angry with Abner because Abner killed his brother Asahel earlier on? I mean, there's no love lost between Abner and Joab at the best of times, but one wonders whether actually Joab is correct in saying that Abner is truthful in his approach, and we're left, as you say, hanging in that place of not knowing yet.
Yeah, and I think it's also, Abner's a mighty general. He is like, he's done it for time and time again. He's a safe pair of hands as far as a general goes. He knows how to command troops. He knows how to do battle strategies. He knows how to do a lot of things, and he's very trained in that. He's very experienced in that. He's had the whole of Saul's reign to get experience. He's got even more experience, and he's done that at a high level. For that guy to come into David, and David's relying on someone like Joab as a kind of similar position for him, it means his job's on the line. So there's not only has his brother been killed by this guy, but this guy's after his job, and he's done a deal. He signed a covenant with David. What on earth's happening? How dare David do that without talking to his general first? But David's not weak like Saul's Ibisheth. He's got something about him, so it's not the same condition. But Job's not happy about it. And we're about to follow that through. But I think this shows, I think one of the things with the house of Saul is Abner is throwing his weight around, especially if he had a relationship with one of Saul's concubines. He's throwing his weight around. He's showing what that, I can do whatever I like, basically. And in that, for Saul's son to turn against him, there's factions in the camp. And Abner knows, well, once there's factions in this camp, it's not going to last. So his career move is, I'll change sides and I'll just join David. It'll be a better career move. Family will finish well. Good retirement scheme. I don't know, but it seems like that kind of a mercenary kind of soldier thing with his own self-interests very much involved. But sometimes when someone's self-interests are so involved, the other, and to change sides like that, they throw their whole lot in with David. There's no king. Probably the biggest threat to David is Abner, in some ways with his power base in Saul's family. But he'd have to make himself king. He'd have to get the backing of priests. He'd have to. There's a whole load of things. He's never going to make it. So David knows. He must know this. it's unlikely he's a threat. Keep your, what is it, friends close and your enemies closer.
Right.
There's some of those principles that play out. But I think looking at it, it's not to let. I think if we're looking at what's God saying through the passage, I think looking at Job and thinking, actually, we mustn't let things that have hurt us turn to bitterness inside of us.
Yeah,
Because when that happens, it taints our vision and view of what God might be doing. And here, God's bringing the whole thing together. It's all coming together. We can look at all the logical reasons for it, as we just have. But actually, God's putting the kingdom together under David, which is a sign of what he's going to do through Jesus. So that's all coming together. And Joab can't see it, because he's in this bitterness because of his brother. He can't let go of it, and that's deep.
Yeah, Joab seems to me like somebody who's it's difficult to keep tabs on for David, because he seems, I don't know. I mean, there's no mention here in chapter 2 when Joab goes out to meet Abner by the pool at Gibeon. There's no mention that David sent him out. I mean, no. I know that's conjecture, but whereas just at the beginning of chapter 2, David asks God directly, "What shall I do? Shall I go up to any other the cities of Judah?" And the Lord said, "Go up." And then David said, "Where shall I go up?" And he said, "Hebron." So David's actually in communication with God at the moment for direction, and it's quite specific. So Abner, to me, and Joab, the two of them, are quite sort of they've grown to these positions. I mean, Joab is the nephew of David. Abner is the great uncle, is the uncle of Saul that was. So these two have got quite a big sort of self worth, if you like. They're full of pride, I should imagine, about who they are. So they go off and do things on their own. And as you say, the emotions come out when Abner kills Joab's brother. That really gets the juices going. And even though he doesn't actually pursue him and kill him at that time, Joab's constantly at the back of his mind, I think, angry with this thing, and actually carrying anger on. As you say, colours how it blocks you seeing what God's actually trying to do in your life, really, because you're allowing the flesh to take control.
Yeah. Or you make it all about yourself and not about the thing that God's doing, and I think
that doesn't it say in the Proverbs, only through pride comes conjecture. Proverb. So pride is the key cause of any argument. Yeah. And here we see two people with great pride trying to outdo each other.
Yeah. And jostling for position. And so shall we move on? Do the next bit? I think I mean that we can't stop on a cliffhanger like that too often. Shall I read the next bit? 26 onwards, and it goes. When Joab came out of David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern at Sirah. But David did not know about it. When Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into the midst of the gate to speak with him privately. And there he struck him in the stomach, so he died, for the blood of Ashiel his brother. Afterwards, when David heard of it, he said, "I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord for the blood of Abner the son of Ner. May it fall upon the head of Joab and upon all his father's house. May the house of Joab never be without one who has discharge, who is leprous, or who holds a spindle, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks bread." So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he'd put their brother Ashiel to death in the battle at Gibeon. Then David said to Joab and all the people who were with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner." And King David followed the prior, and they buried Abner at Hebron. And the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king lamented for Abner, saying, "Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen." And all the people wept again over him. Then all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was yet day. But David swore, saying, "God do so to me and more also, if I taste bread or anything else till the sun goes down." And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as everything that the king did pleased all the people. So all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's will to put to death Abner the son of Ner. And the king said to his servants, "Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? And I was gentle today, though anointed king. These men, the sons of Zeruiah, are more severe than I. The Lord repay to the evildoer according to his wickedness." So this next bit really is astounding to me. Looking at it in one way, it shows David leads by his heart. He's doing something, and people who know David will know that's what he'd do. And when you've got a king or someone like that, people get to know their likes and dislikes. They get to know what they like. I think for Joab, he'll feel the chill of, actually, things are not right here. He's been outmaneuvered politically by David here hugely. He's actually said, "This is wrong. The people that have done this are wrong." He's saying, he's mourning for the. You've got to think, at the beginning of this chapter, we read the verse that said there's a whole load of battles between the king, the house of Saul and the house of David. Abner's leading those battles against the house of David. Here's David yet again mourning for someone who was out to get him at one point.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because this is a civil war, so they know each other quite well from before.
Yeah.
So Abner was not a stranger to David as an individual.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No. That's a really good point. And so it's civil, but it's not very nice. I think the battle between these guys, Joab and Abner, is horrendous. That's just straightforward murder. It's not a battle. It's not a war, and you think, well, why hasn't David punished Joab? Because actually, but some of these things need dealing with in the right way. I don't think David's been passive here, because he's been very active in his mourning, and he's been very active in letting people know he's displeased with this, and publicly letting all the people know he's very displeased with this. So everyone's waiting to see what happens next a little bit, I would suggest. But he's very clearly said, these people are severe, but God will punish the person, that did this. And he puts him into God's hands, like he put Saul into God's hands many years before.
Yeah. It's sorry.
No, go on. Yeah.
No, I was just thinking. It's interesting why he didn't get publicly punished for doing this job, because he's murdered somebody, as Joab.
Yeah.
But he is David's nephew, and one can imagine his sister having the ear of David and probably influencing David on what he says. But if I remember rightly, and I haven't got to the end yet in our studies, but didn't David on his deathbed instruct Solomon to kill Joab? Yes, Joab.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that actually in the end, Joab did get his due desert.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I think in it's saying in the notes here in the ESV, Job is apparently too important and useful for David to punish him for killing Abner. So he does
yeah,
the best he can by cursing him, having a funeral for Abner, and publicly mourning and chanting lament for him. And that's very a very powerful statement, but it's not. It leaves something pending, and like you say, was something that followed through after his lifetime.
yeah,
There were a few things he mentioned, but he wasn't pleased about that, and he stayed displeased about it for his whole reign.
yeah. And what strikes me about David is he doesn't shoot from the hip, as they say. He does actually have time to think about things and to consult God. And when you think about it, what was it? It was about 13 years, I believe, from when he was anointed as king by Samuel to the point where he was actually made king of Judah. And then there's a further, I can't remember how many years there are now, but there's a certain period of time between when he reigned over Judah to when he's actually getting to this point now, where he's actually having the two sides coming together. It just speaks to me about patience, and then as you're waiting, you get all these side things that actually can distract you from what God's actually got in your life, the purpose that God's got in your life. You might not have as dramatic things as your son being killed by somebody else who then you bless and all the rest of it, but it just speaks to me that actually when God's given you a purpose and God's given you a vision, and it's certain, you have to keep that in mind, and keep going and not give up, and allow God to actually work around that to the point where He actually gets you to that place where He wants you. And I think this is probably why David. It probably I take back what I said about David's sister giving him the ear. It's probably David working with God, because he has the heart of God, and God says to him, "No, you don't take revenge on your son at the moment, on your nephew, but you can feel the sadness for." I get mixed up with all the names now. With Abner.
And I think there's this. I think in some ways, God doesn't always sort things out instantly.
Yeah.
There's been, I think I shared this at a time before. There's a bad attitude I had in my teenage years. And I think when I was in my late teens, in my bedroom in a totally different country to the one I'd had the bad attitude in, I find God just bringing it up and saying, you need to just get this right. And I was dealing with stuff in my heart, in my bedroom, years later, that actually I'd been hard-hearted in this season, especially towards leadership and things like that, in my teenage youth group years, and actually God began softening my heart, began working through things, and I was thinking, well, I've had great times in your presence, Lord, since then, and you never raised this. If you had this issue between me, why didn't you raise it then? Why are you raising it all these years later? But God's patient. and he deals with things not always on the surface level. He sometimes waits a while till we're in the right position where that actually can be properly dealt with, rather than just a surface level. Oh, I've ticked that box. No, actually there was something that needed to happen. And I think this is with our plans and things. Sometimes we have a plan, we feel God saying he's going to do this, or we assume that's instant, we assume that's McDonald's, it's blah, 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 blah. It's coming up in the order, oh, it's in the tray, okay, it's coming through. But actually it's not. Sometimes so if David had rushed into things before the weight of things had happened, he wouldn't have been there long. This is where the tribes in their hearts, it's a battle for hearts and minds. The tribes in their hearts and minds are going, do you know, I'd rather have David. Don't say that, you get in trouble. But actually that's where they're, and then gradually, we're there. Actually, oh, Abner wants to link this up. We're there. The whole damage is done through the system. The whole weight of the system's responding. It's like even when Saul was made king, he knew that long before. But it was that waiting. Now we need to go through this tribe. Is it this tribe? Is it this tribe? Is it okay, there he is hiding behind the baggage. We found him. And actually there's some of this waiting for the weight of force to arrive to put it in place. And this is where, there's things that God's long promised that we wait for. And we're thinking, have we missed it? Is it gone? And then you notice some indicators of big things shifting and moving. And they're not there yet. And you're frustrated. But actually you've got to wait patiently for the weight of things to almost force it to come about. And there's sometimes those things with God's plans that no one ever does a course on. I've never heard that course.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you've also got lots of people around you who are not listening to God, and God's given them a freedom of choice.
Yeah.
So they make choices around you that are not necessarily God's choices.
Yeah.
And that then influences you. But you've got to keep going with what you know God wants you to do. In spite of what actually is going on around you and what tries to knock you off course. And I just had a picture there as you were talking about when I'm an ex-seafarer, as you know, many, many years ago, and you'd set a course line, but you'd have all sorts of things that would try and take you off those course. You'd have the current, you'd have the wind, you'd have all sorts of things trying to knock you off course, but you'd make adjustments in the environment that you're in to keep on that course, and I think that's where spending time with God, and I'm sorry to get back to having that communion with God.
Don't be sorry.
to make adjustments. It's just that relationship with God has just been pressing on me so much over the last few months. The importance of actually having that constant communion with God, which actually keeps you on track despite all the things that are hitting you from different directions. And it stops you worrying.
And I think you don't see an impatience in David for things to come about. It looks very patient. And actually even his so he had terror about Saul and fled to the Philistines. That's not led by God to the Philistines. There's no but because he's following God, even when he makes strategic errors, in my view, but he seems to make a strategic error. Actually, God even makes sure he isn't in the battle with Saul. He isn't in. God, there's so many things God looks after in that. And so it's God's big plans come about. Our free will might send us into the Philistines and have we messed up God's? No, actually God's so certain on his plan, he's going to bring it about. There's some of that comes through, and I think is very remarkable when you look at the life of David and how God brings things about.
There's just a phrase that was brought to my mind the other day. His gifts and calling are without repentance. What he sets out in your life, he doesn't negate on. He'll keep you going on that, and you shouldn't give up, because his gifts and calling on your life are without repentance. He doesn't take it away. He doesn't give and take it away. He gives, and that remains. His promises are yes and amen.
No, that's very good. Well, I don't know, but I think we're getting some very juicy spiritual morsels out of this. But I'm just sort of thinking the story goes on, and I'm just I don't want to be impatient. We've got 15 minutes, but I wonder whether we move on to chapter 4. Do you think we could do that?
15 minutes, yeah, go for it if you want.
Yeah. So,
do
yeah,
you want me to read?
Yeah, go for it, and we'll.
Shall I do the whole of chapter 4 then?
Yeah, that sounds good. I think it's a mere 12 verses.
Okay, so Ishbosheth is murdered is the title on chapter 4 for me. So that just
spoiler alert. Yeah. Yeah.
When Saul's son heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost heart, and all Israel was troubled. Now Saul's son had 2 men who were captains of troops. The name of one was Baanah, and the name of the other was Rechab, the son of Rimmon, the Beerothite of the children of Benjamin. For Beeroth also was part of Benjamin, because of the Beerothites fled from Gittaim and have been sojourners until this day. Being sojourners, that means they're living in the place, aren't they? Until this day. Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened, as she made haste to flee, that he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. God. Yeah. Then the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rechab and Baanah, set out and came at about the it puts me off, doesn't it? Came at about the heat of the day to the house of Ishbosheth, who was lying on his bed at noon, and they came there all the way into the house as though to get wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. For when they came into the house, he was lying on his bed in his bedroom. Then they struck him and killed him, beheaded him, and took his head, and were all night escaping through the plain. And they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron, and said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life, and the Lord has avenged my lord, the king, this day of Saul and his descendants." But David answered Rechab and Baanah, his brother, the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, and said to them, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all adversity? When someone told me, saying, 'Look, Saul is dead,' thinking to have brought good news, I arrested him and had him executed in Ziklag, the one who thought I would give him a reward for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed a righteous person in his own house on his bed? Therefore, shall I not now require his blood at your hand and remove you from the earth?" So David commanded his young men, and they executed them, cut off their heads, their hands and feet, and hanged them by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner in Hebron. God, it's a bloodthirsty book, is this to Samuel, isn't it?
Oh, it is, yeah. But that is the Old Testament life, in battles and wars and things in the Civil War, which wasn't very civil. So with this, you've got these two trying to. Yeah. So Abner is such a general. He has kept the king in place. With him gone, might seems there's things you could get away with that you couldn't get away with before. So these guys think, hey, what an opportunity to further our career paths. Let's go and top the king off. We've got access to his house. We could just do it. And so they do. And I think it's very gross. You sort of think they chop off his head as proof they'd done it. And that is real nasty butchery. But also it makes you think, why was the king not defended? Were there not guards around watching? Were there not things like that? No, he wasn't protected. He wasn't looked after. And his defences had gone. And these guys have done something indefensible. Yeah, sorry, go on, David.
One wonders why he was lying in his bed at noon as well.
Well, I think
siesta, or was he just being lazy? And
having lived in different parts of the world, a lot of people will have a lot of nations nap during the day. So in some nations I've gone, you'll be up early, be doing stuff at 8 o'clock in the morning. You'll be working hard at that point in the day. Come noontime, everything stops for lunch. After lunch, there's a bit of a rest for a couple of hours. And then the evening, there's sort of a spurge from about 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the evening, another spurge of work. And then you have a meal at 9 o'clock at night and go to bed. So I think these guys, in the heat of the day, especially if it's a hot day, a little snooze during the warmth of the day is something encouraged. I don't know, but that kind of work pattern is quite interesting. I think is it Spain? They have a 2-hour break sort of around lunchtime and into the afternoon. Some countries it's 3 at different points in the year. Some countries like the Sahara, where I visited, some of those places, it's really significant. It is stifling hot, 50 degrees Celsius. You're not going to get much done at that kind of temperature. So I suspect that, but I'm imposing something I know from different places on that. But yeah.
I was just wondering why have they put this verse 4 in there about Mephibosheth? What's that got to do with this?
Well, Mephibosheth is going to show up later.
Yeah, but why at this point in this story? In this point, is that injected here? What's he got to do with this murder of Ishbosheth?
All right. So someone else has thought that and put it in the ESV notes here. It says he's probably put here to show why there is no move to make him king after Ishbosheth's death. He's still a child and he's crippled, and he's further mentioned in chapter 9, chapter 16, chapter 19 and chapter 21.
Well, he becomes David and enjoys his presence, doesn't he? He becomes a great colleague of David. But it's interesting that because he must be about 13, I should think, by now, because Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son, but Jonathan was killed some time back. Yeah. So I just couldn't understand why they injected this into this particular story.
It's probably who's the next heir. Okay, so this guy's dead, king's dead, long live the king. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, this king, the next person in line is crippled and is a child, hasn't got the weight to follow through with this. Okay, we can understand why there's a gap. But also, I think for David, his loyalty to Jonathan, he promised a loyalty to Jonathan and his ancestors, and to the house of Saul. So it's not, David hasn't made promises just to Saul. Now Saul's dead, nothing else counts. No, actually, he's got deep honor and integrity, and some of this is very powerful in a nation. If you think about it, the top of a nation has that kind of integrity, is known for that kind of integrity. What does that do right the way through the system? I mean, when people are trading in a market and someone's trying to swindle someone, or something's going off like that, does that kick in? When someone's doing murder, I mean, does his attitude towards murder actually bring down the death rate around? There's less people disappearing all of a sudden. There's because actually the king's not happy with that. Well, if he's not happy with that, okay, that's not going to happen so much. So I think that kind of integrity at the top, and I think there's a verse in Proverbs, says righteousness exalts a nation. And there's something that happens through a nation when you've got integrity at the top.
Yeah.
It's a very rare thing nowadays, but that is a very powerful dynamic. Welcome, Carolyn. We are on 2 Samuel chapter 4 at the minute, which is looking at after Saul's death and dealing with the kingdom and how that's now heading towards David. So that's where we are. If you want to follow,
I will have to go in about 3 minutes.
That's fine. Yeah. That's great. So any other points there, David? You can see.
I was just thinking that actually, Abner really trying to combine the two nations together? Well, the nation together, the Israelites and the what's the other one?
Judah and Israel. Is that what you're saying?
Judah. That's right. Judah and Israel combining. Because then Joab murders Abner, so that sort of could actually have stopped the process. But with Abner gone, Ishbosheth has nobody looking after him now, because Abner would have been the one that was actually supporting him. So I guess the elders thought that actually, okay, we're going to have to get rid of Ishbosheth now. Just to make sure that we can actually combine the two together. I don't know whether it was God. It's one of those things that's not necessarily God's plan, but God works His plan through it.
Yeah. And the other thing that if we look at that line you've taken there, David, is Abner had done a covenant with David.
Yeah.
So in other words, he was viewing himself as almost equal to David. Actually, I'll help David deliver this, and he'll owe me big, because the 10 tribes I've got, and he's got 2 tribes. It puts me in a powerful position. Yeah. But actually, in some ways, whether it's God's will, whatever it is, David's reign is not to be confused with Saul's. It's not to be tainted with anything of Saul's, really. Yeah. And so in this, even a deal with Abner doesn't come about. David is standing on what God has anointed him into this position. This is not anything that has come by someone else propping him up.
Yeah, it reminds me of that verse that all things work for good for those who love the Lord. Mm-hmm. So all things work for good for David, who loves the Lord.
Yeah,
and not necessarily being God's activity.
Yeah. Well, thank you, David. Thanks, Carolyn. I think we'll leave it there. But we've
just arrived.
just arrived. But we're just about to go offline. So I'll have you got anything you wanted to chip in, Carolyn, very quickly?
No, I was just been listening to the birth of Christ. Actually, I'm telling the truth. So I'm
yeah.
I got
yeah. It's a big gear shift onto this, but yeah. Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, David, and I'll move us offline here now.